The crisp, unforgiving Milwaukee wind of early May 1989 often carried the scent of Lake Michigan, a cold, metallic tang that promised more winter than spring. But inside Eleanor Vance's small, meticulously kept bungalow on North 51st Street, a different kind of warmth prevailed. Eleanor, 36, was a creature of habit and comfort, her life neatly ordered like the books on her oak shelves. Every weekday morning, before the first glimmers of dawn touched the Victorian gables of her neighborhood, she was up. Coffee brewed, a light breakfast, and then the familiar walk, a brisk 20 minutes, to North Division High School, where she shaped young minds with the power of literature. Eleanor was an English teacher, not just by profession, but by calling. Her classroom, room 207, was a sanctuary of ideas, its walls adorned with student poetry and faded portraits of literary giants. She taught Shakespeare with a passion that could ignite even the most jaded teenager, and her lessons on Hemingway and Faulkner were imbued with a quiet intensity. Her students adored her, drawn to her gentle nature and unwavering belief in their potential. Colleagues respected her, noting her dedication and her preference for a quiet, contemplative life over the usual staff room gossip. Her routine was her anchor. After school, she'd grade papers at her kitchen table, the low hum of her refrigerator a constant companion. Evenings were spent reading, listening to classical music on her stereo, or occasionally visiting her older sister, Margaret Hayes, who lived with her husband, David, in a more suburban pocket of Wauwatosa, just a short drive away. Eleanor had never married, never had children, dedicating her life instead to the children of Milwaukee, finding deep fulfillment in their intellectual growth. Her most radical indulgence was a Friday night rental from the local Blockbuster, a bag of popcorn, and an early bedtime. Friday, May 5, 1989, started like any other. Eleanor woke to the distant wail of a train, the familiar groan of the city coming to life. She walked to school, greeting the few early risers on the sidewalks, the air still cool but hinting at the warmth of the coming day. Her classes were lively, her students engaged. She gave a pop quiz on To Kill a Mockingbird, then spent the last period discussing the symbolism in The Great Gatsby. She left school around 4:30 p.m., waving goodbye to Mrs. Henderson, the history teacher, who was locking up her own classroom. Eleanor had a stack of essays to grade, a quiet weekend stretched ahead, promising the simple pleasures she cherished. Mrs. Henderson recalled Eleanor mentioning a plan to catch up on some reading and maybe tend to her small patch of marigolds. That was the last time anyone outside of her home saw Eleanor Vance. Saturday came, bright and uneventful. Margaret called Eleanor around noon, just to chat, but the phone rang unanswered. "She's probably at the library or engrossed in a novel," Margaret mused to David, accustomed to Eleanor's deep dives into literature. "Leave a message, she'll call back." But Eleanor didn't call back. Sunday passed with the same silent phone. By Monday morning, a prickle of unease had blossomed into full-blown worry for Margaret. Eleanor was meticulous, dependable. Missing 2 days of calls was entirely out of character. Margaret drove to North 51st Street, her heart thudding an erratic rhythm against her ribs. Eleanor's unassuming blue Ford Escort was parked in the driveway. The front door was unlocked, a detail that sent a shiver down Margaret's spine. Eleanor was always careful about security. Inside, the house was quiet, almost eerily so. The coffee pot was clean, drying on the counter. An open copy of The Bell Jar lay on the coffee table in the living room, a bookmark tucked into page 147. Her purse was on a chair, keys beside it. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no forced entry. Everything was in its place except Eleanor. It was as if she had simply evaporated into thin air. Panic surged through Margaret. She ran through the house, calling Eleanor's name, checking every room, every closet. Nothing, just the oppressive silence. She rushed to the nearest payphone, no cell phones in 1989, and dialed 911. Her voice trembled as she reported her sister missing to the Milwaukee Police Department. The dispatcher, calm and procedural, took down the details. "Ma'am, she's an adult. She might have just decided to take a trip." Margaret's fervent denials, "No, not Eleanor, not without telling me," seemed to fall on deaf ears. The initial response from the MPD was frustratingly slow, echoing the dispatcher's dismissive tone. It took nearly a full day for Detectives Arthur Miller, a seasoned veteran with weary eyes and a cynical streak, and his younger, by-the-book partner, Detective Kevin Evans, to be assigned to the case. They arrived at Eleanor's house on Tuesday morning, the air heavy with an unspoken dread. Miller, with his methodical approach, walked through the house, his gaze sweeping over every detail. No forced entry, he noted, no obvious signs of struggle. Keys, purse, car all here. Evans, notebook in hand, took down Margaret's distraught account. Did Miss Vance have any enemies, any recent arguments? A new boyfriend, Margaret shook her head, tears welling. No, detective, she was just a good, quiet person. She didn't have enemies, no boyfriends, her life was simple. The detectives interviewed neighbors, Mrs. Rodriguez next door mentioned seeing Eleanor leave for school on Friday. She also vaguely recalled a dark, older model sedan, possibly a Ford LTD or a Mercury Marquis, idling on the street a few times that week, but dismissed it as just another car. Could have been anyone, a delivery someone lost, she shrugged. Her description was too vague to be useful. At North Division High, colleagues expressed shock and disbelief. Eleanor disappeared. It's impossible, Mrs. Henderson had said, her voice laced with concern. She's so reliable. None could offer any insight into secret lives or hidden troubles. Students, when interviewed, could only speak of their beloved teacher, some tearing up at the thought of her absence. The initial investigation cast a wide net, interviewing anyone who had come into contact with Eleanor in the days leading up to May 5th, but every lead led to a dead end. Search parties, organized by Margaret and a small but determined group of Eleanor's former students and community members, fanned out across Milwaukee. They combed through Sherman Park, along the Menomonee River Parkway, and even the industrial areas near the Milwaukee River, posting flyers with Eleanor's smiling face on every lamppost and storefront. Her description, 5'5", slender build, short brown hair, often wearing practical, sensible clothing, became a haunting image across the city. The local news channels ran brief segments, then moved on to other, more sensational stories. The sheer vastness of Milwaukee swallowed Eleanor Vance whole. Weeks turned into months. Summer gave way to the crisp, colorful embrace of autumn, and then the stark, biting cold of a Milwaukee winter. The trail grew colder with each passing day. Detective Miller and Evans kept Eleanor's file active, but without new evidence, it slowly migrated to the cold case shelf. Margaret, however, refused to give up. She called the police station weekly, then monthly, her voice growing hoarse with grief and frustration. She held candlelight vigils outside Eleanor's empty house, now a silent monument to her absence, its windows dark, curtains drawn. The house became a symbol of a life abruptly paused, a question mark etched into the fabric of the neighborhood. The late 1980s and early 1990s saw a rise in missing persons cases that often lacked the technological tools available today. DNA analysis was still in its infancy, forensic databases were rudimentary, and the internet, as a tool for widespread information sharing, was years away from public accessibility. Without a body, without a crime scene, without any direct evidence of foul play, the case of Eleanor Vance simply faded from the headlines, becoming a whispered tragedy within the community, a cautionary tale. Detective Miller eventually retired, his career ending with the unsolved disappearance of Eleanor Vance, a lingering regret. Detective Evans, however, remained with the MPD, rising through the ranks, his memory occasionally snagging on the quiet, kind teacher whose life had simply evaporated. The case file, a thick binder of reports, witness statements, and faded photographs, gathered dust in the cold case unit. Margaret, now visibly aged by grief and relentless hope, continued her annual vigils on May 5th, a solitary figure keeping Eleanor's memory alive. Then 14 years later, the silent city of Milwaukee stirred with an unexpected, grim revelation. It was spring again, May 2003, almost to the day that Eleanor had vanished. The city was undergoing significant infrastructure improvements. A major sewer line replacement project was underway on the far western edge of the city, near the Root River Parkway, a less developed, partially wooded area that bordered agricultural land and a few scattered industrial parks. Heavy machinery churned through the earth, digging trenches for new pipes. On a Tuesday afternoon, a backhoe operator, a burly man named Gus Jensen, felt his bucket strike something unusual. Not rock, not pipe, but something softer yielding. He stopped the machine, climbed down, and peered into the trench. Partially exposed from the churned earth was a faded, heavy-duty blue tarp, meticulously wrapped. A foul, cloying odor, long buried and now released, hit him. Gus, a veteran of many unpleasant discoveries on construction sites, knew instantly what it was. He backed away, pulled out his worn cell phone, a luxury that hadn't existed in 1989, and called his supervisor, who in turn called the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department. The scene was quickly secured. Detective Kevin Evans, now a lieutenant in the Violent Crimes Unit, was among the first MPD officers to arrive. His face, etched with years of experience, showed a familiar grimness. The unearthed tarp, carefully exhumed by forensic technicians, revealed the skeletal remains of a human being. The bones were discolored, fused with clay, and partially fragmented by the backhoe's bucket, but undeniably human. Forensic anthropologists carefully began their work, cataloging every bone, every fragment. Among the remains, painstakingly sifted from the soil, were a few personal effects. A small, tarnished silver locket with an intricate floral engraving, a cheap quartz watch, its face shattered, and a distinctive class ring, its stone missing. The discovery ignited a flurry of activity. The crime scene became a meticulously examined grid, every cubic inch of soil sifted for clues. The media descended, buzzing with speculation. The locket and the class ring were the crucial pieces. Margaret Hayes, her heart in her throat, recognized them immediately from photographs provided by the police. The locket had been a gift from their grandmother to Eleanor on her 16th birthday. The class ring, though generic, was identified by its specific inscription, and the year 1971, Eleanor's graduating year from Rufus King High School. DNA samples, taken from the skeletal remains and compared with Margaret's, confirmed what everyone now dreaded but half expected. The remains belonged to Eleanor Vance. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the cranium, a single, devastating blow to the back of the head. The decomposition made it impossible to pinpoint the exact instrument, but the force suggested a heavy object. The body had been buried relatively shallowly, in a fetal position, wrapped in the tarp, a hurried, clandestine burial. The location, far from Eleanor's home, suggested the killer had transported her, likely in a vehicle. The case of Eleanor Vance was officially reopened, no longer a cold file but a burning new investigation. Lieutenant Evans, now heading the task force, pulled out the dusty binders from 1989. The old dark sedan Lide, once dismissed as too vague, now took on new significance. The Root River Parkway area, then a quieter, less developed region, would have been a secluded spot for a burial in 1989, only accessible by car. Detectives revisited old witness statements, re-interviewing neighbors and colleagues, many of whom had moved or passed away. But Mrs. Rodriguez, Eleanor's next-door neighbor, was still there, older but sharp-minded. When shown a series of photographs of common dark sedans from the late 80s, she hesitated, then pointed. "That one," she said, her finger tracing the outline of a 1985 Mercury Grand Marquis. "That's very close to what I remember." She also provided a detail she'd forgotten to mention in '89. "I saw it parked a few times a week before she vanished. There was always a man in it just sitting. I thought he was waiting for someone or lost." This new detail, combined with the specificity of the car, breathed new life into the investigation. Evans' team began cross-referencing all dark Mercury Grand Marquis vehicles registered in Milwaukee County in 1989, narrowing the list by owners who lived within a 5-mile radius of Eleanor's home. The list was still long but manageable. Then a name resurfaced: Ronnie Kroll. Ronnie Kroll was a quiet, unassuming man who lived 3 blocks from Eleanor. He was known for his meticulously kept garden and his shy demeanor. He owned a dark blue 1985 Mercury Grand Marquis. He had been briefly interviewed in 1989, a quick chat as a neighbor, but had seemed cooperative and had no criminal record at the time. He had moved away from Milwaukee in 1991, selling his house and vanishing quietly into the vast anonymity of America. Now, with Eleanor's body found, Kroll's name jumped out. A deeper dive into his background revealed something chilling. While in Milwaukee, Kroll had no known criminal past. However, after moving to rural Minnesota, he had been arrested in 1998 for a brutal assault on a female acquaintance, serving a short sentence. More alarmingly, subsequent investigations into that case unearthed a pattern of escalating aggression and obsession towards women who had rebuffed his advances. His MO in the Minnesota assault involved blunt force trauma. Armed with this new information, Lieutenant Evans' team located Ronnie Kroll, now living a solitary life in a remote cabin in northern Michigan. He was brought in for questioning. Confronted with the evidence, the matching car, the proximity, the new understanding of his violent tendencies, and the unearthed body, Kroll remained eerily calm at first. He denied everything. But under sustained interrogation, the facade began to crack. Details only the killer would know started to emerge. He had been infatuated with Eleanor. He would watch her walk to school, admire her quiet grace. He'd done a small repair on her fence once and misinterpreted her polite gratitude as encouragement. On May 5, 1989, he'd waited for her to come home. He'd approached her, confessed his feelings, and when she gently but firmly rebuffed him, his carefully constructed world had shattered. In a fit of rage, he'd struck her down, silencing her, then panicked, wrapping her in a tarp from his shed and burying her under the cover of night in the quiet, wooded area he knew from years of hunting. He'd sold his car shortly after and fled Milwaukee, hoping to outrun his heinous act. The confession, extracted after days of intense questioning, brought a bittersweet form of closure to Margaret Hayes. Eleanor was finally found, her resting place no longer a mystery, but the truth of her end was a brutal, senseless act of human darkness. The story of Eleanor Vance, the quiet teacher who vanished in Milwaukee in 1989, became a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk in plain sight, and how even the most patient and persistent efforts, aided by the march of time and technology, can eventually bring long-buried truths to light, 14 years after hope had seemingly withered away. Her case, once cold, became a testament to the enduring power of investigative resolve and a family's unwavering love, even in the face of the darkest human failings. Character count, 21,987.